Welcome to another edition of 805 Sports Talk. And before we get you into Week 9 of the high school football season, we're going to take a minute to kind of get into the World Series. A lot of people around Santa Maria and California in general are excited as the Dodgers are in the World Series for the first time since 1988.
Local Los Angeles Dodgers fans
went to
gathered
Chavez,
at
Ravine on
Buffalo
Tuesday for Game 1. But here on the Central Coast, a lot of fans were excited going to restaurants or other establishments throughout the city, watching the game and celebrating here from home. Brian Stanley, our contributor, went out to Buffalo Wild Wings Tuesday night for Game 1 and caught a lot of Santa Marians watching Game 1 of the World Series.
Local Los Angeles Dodgers fans gathered at Buffalo Wild Wings in Santa Maria to watch their team take on the Houston Astros in the Major League Baseball World Series. Growing up listening to the legendary Vince Scully broadcasts, friends Justin Barclay and Cody Lacoste are thrilled to watch the Dodgers get back to the World Series for the first time since 1988.
Feels really good. It's pretty awesome. Like listening to Vince Scully as a kid, there's nothing better. So then to finally make it to the World Series,
especially almost making it the past 5 to 10 years, yeah.
Taking in Game 1 with her parents, Los Angeles native Nicole Thompson was raised a Dodgers fan, attending her first game before she could walk.
So the very first Dodger game I ever went to was with my grandfather. I was about 6 months old, and he didn't have anybody to go with him, and he was watching me because I think my mom was working. So I went to a Dodger game.
Referring to the Dodgers' trip to the World Series as a gift for her 40th birthday this year, Thompson remembers vividly the last time the Dodgers won the World Series, back in 1988.
I do remember Kirk Gibbs. How could you forget that? I watched that game with my dad, and it was absolutely, that was the coolest thing ever.
Seeing the Dodgers in the World Series for the first time, Isaac Romero breaks down the Dodgers' strengths that he believes will lead Los Angeles to another World Series championship.
I think that Kershaw's back for Game 1. Hopefully we'll see him in Game 5 to close it out. But I'm really seeing the bats come alive again. They've really held us, in a really comfortable position. They held our pitchers really comfortable, really helped us out. And then the bullpen's really helping us out too. This year it's one of those things that, we really had the bullpen, we had the, starting pitchers that, our rotations worked perfectly, so.
With the Dodgers up 3-1 in the bottom of the 7th, fans were disappointed when Los Angeles couldn't extend their lead with 2 runners on as Austin Barnes flied out to end the inning. Confident in the Dodgers' performance after Game 1, Ernesto Tovar doesn't see the series making it back to Los Angeles for Game 6.
I see the Dodgers winning about 5. Let's get 1, give the Houston 1, and we'll finish it off in Houston territory. It would be pretty cool to finish it off in LA, but you know what? Whenever they win, as long as they win, that's all that matters,
The Dodgers went on to beat the Astros 3-1 in Game 1 of the World Series.
The Dodgers won Game 1 3-1. So Game 2 is Wednesday night from Los Angeles, and they'll move the series over to Houston starting Friday. It's a best-of-7 series. We'll see if the Dodgers can hold on. A lot of people at Chavez Ravine on Tuesday were confident before the game, and I'm sure they're more confident now after Clayton Kershaw pitched really well, and that Houston Astro offense was really stifled. So the series resumes Wednesday night. We're going to switch over to the high school football season. It's already Week 9, so we have Friday night and one more week after that of the high school football season, and things are really starting to heat up as league play has intensified. Probably the best LPL game of the year was last Friday night at Houck Stadium. Lorenzo, you were on hand for that one as Lompoc held on for a 17-7 win over San Ynez. Now the Braves will host St. Joseph, another huge LPL game Friday night. We'll be at that one. How are the Braves feeling right now? Do you think they were a little off their game, or do you think San Ynez was a better team than maybe some people were anticipating, and how do you think they're going to do against St. Joseph?
Well, Jimmy Gardner told me something that resonated with me. He did believe that a number of Brave players did underestimate San Ynez, the same San Ynez team that was 7-0. But, Andrew Jones and Gardner and a number of Brave players, they look at this San Ynez game as their wake-up call, knowing that if they truly want to win the LPL again and make that southern section and state run, it's only going to get harder from here. And the San Ynez game was proof of that, because offensively, the Braves were off their game for most of the night. I mean, Toa was kept out of the end zone. Shamar Savage statistically had one of his worst games, but I mean, Jimmy Gardner was able to step up on both sides as a receiver and as a safety. So it goes to show you that Lompoc isn't just a two-horse team. I mean, there's other players who could step up, and especially in a game of that magnitude. So I would imagine that St. Joseph's going to come at something similar defensively, but I just feel like that the fact that it's at home and the fact that now you got to account for somebody outside of Tao and Savage, I mean, it still swings the momentum the Lompoc's way.
All right, now historically, the St. Joseph Lompoc game has been closer than the San Ynez Lompoc game, but this was just a 10-point game. Do you think it's going to be closer between Lompoc and St. Joseph than it was last week?
I believe it, because I just feel like looking at the St. Joseph team, they're deeper at wide receiver. And not only that, there was this perception that the Knights will kind of fall off defensively. Well, Tim Miller, who was just offered by the University of San Diego, he's been taking the baton that Fenton Will left behind, and he's put together an outstanding senior season, and he's going to have the task of trying to slow up Toa. So, you know, I mean, top to bottom, St. Joseph truly does have some things going for them that can actually spell upset. But again, I mean, the fact that it's at Huck and the fact that Lompoc proved that they can win without Tao and Savage, I mean, I just feel like the advantage still goes Lompoc's way. I think it'll be a close game for 3 quarters, and then you'll see the Braves pull away in the 4th.
Okay. Elliot, I don't think any of us picked a 10-point game. All of us had about a 2-touchdown win for Lompoc. Were you surprised that it was just a 17-7 victory for the Braves?
I was, but here's where those blowouts come in. You know, you score 70 points, 59 points, and you take out your starters at halftime because you don't want to run it up anymore. You want to give them a good half of work, but they're not playing full games, and now they're going to play the full 48 minutes against San Ynez. They're going to have to do it against St. Joe. They're going to have to do it in the playoffs. So, you know, those blowouts can really come back to hurt them, because these guys have got to play 48 minutes now, because there's no gimmies against San Ynez or St. Joe. So I think that St. Joe, if they use their really strong passing attack, Dino Maldonado has matured into a great passer, they could tire out Lompoc and could sneak past them. Right now, Lompoc is still favored, but I just don't see this week being a blowout. I see another 17-7 or 21-14, something like that, yeah.
I'm going to be glued to see which receiver Dallas Canley gets locked into. I mean, I would imagine Nate Guzman will be at the top of the list, but then you have to account for Mason Bealey. You have to account for Joe Miller. You also have to account for Jaden Vargas. I've seen him catch out of the backfield, so it goes to show you how deep the St. Joseph receiving core is. And, you know, Andrew Jones kind of hinted that St. Joseph might be an even tougher assignment compared to San Ynez.
I think so, yeah. I think they're a better team. San Ynez, once again, fattened up on some cupcakes early in the season. Didn't have any trouble with most teams. All year long, we knew it was going to come down to their games against Lompoc and St. Joseph. I mean, they've gone 8-2 and not made the playoffs because they've lost to Lompoc and St. Joe. And I think St. Joe, even though San Ynez has some great wide receivers and has been able to score a lot of points, I think St. Joe overall is the more balanced team, and they can run and pass, and they've got a lot of, like you just said, a lot of receivers that Maldonado can mix it up and throw it around. They can throw into the slot. They can throw deep. So I think Lompoc's going to have its hands full, and they're going to be running around in that defensive backfield all night. But that running game of Lompoc's with guys like Shamar Savage, I don't expect him to have 2 bad games in a row. I think they still get the edge.
Okay. I think that St. Joseph wide receiving core matchup against Lompoc's defensive backs matchup is a very intriguing one. Do you think that is the most critical matchup Friday night, or will it be if Jaden Vargas can get running offensively for St. Joseph, or how St. Joseph's defense can match up with Lompoc's running game? What do you think the most critical matchup is?
To me, I feel like that St. Joseph's bread and butter is their receiving core. I mean, if that passing attack doesn't get going, I mean, the advantage immediately swings Lompoc's way. But, you know, Vargas is a Swiss Army knife, so he still has to provide the balance. I think if you're St. Joseph, you have to rely more on your defensive game plan. Can you do enough to slow down Toa? Can you do enough to slow down Savage, even if it means that the game opens up for Johnny Manzo or Ruben Cortez? Because to me, San Ynez had a brilliant defensive game plan. Well, unfortunately, Lompoc additionally had a brilliant defensive game plan. So,
you mentioned Dino Maldonado. Do you think this could be one of those career-defining games for him Friday night? You know, if he shows out, maybe 3 or 4 touchdown passes that can really elevate him among some of the great St. Joseph quarterbacks. What do you expect out of him?
Well, St. Joe's had some great quarterbacks, including Mark Brunell, who went on to an outstanding career in the pros. He won his 1 Super Bowl as a backup quarterback, but he did have a great professional career. But Mark Brunell never beat Arroyo Grande and Jamie Martin when he was quarterbacking them, and Brunell went on to the better career, so you just never know with these things. But yes, this could be a career-defining game for Maldonado. I don't think he's tall enough to go play D1 football unless he goes as a defensive back, but this could be a game to put him on the map and get some D2s to start looking at him and say, this kid could play at our level. He's really talented, he's durable, and he's got a great command of the field, and he sees the field very well, so he doesn't have to always lock in on a primary receiver. And as we've mentioned, he's got so many options to choose from that he could be throwing that ball all over the field. I think Lompoc has their hands full, but again, it's hard to bet against Lompoc. Yeah. They just find ways to win, and Andrew Jones is going to remind them, I don't think it'll quite be 1,000,000 times, but an awful lot of times, that game, they could have lost that game last week. They're going to come out on fire. Their first quarter could be brutal for St. Joseph. So that's where I'm looking at. You guys are going to see the game. I'll be up in Paso Robles with Righetti, seeing how that turns out, but I'm thinking that Lompoc's going to come out on fire and determined to show everybody that was a fluke, that they won, but only 10 points. That's not a Lompoc football game. So I sort of pity the team that follows San Ynez, and this week at St. Joe, they got a lot of talent. I think they'll keep it close, but Lompoc's going to be on a mission. Andrew Jones will see to that. Yeah,
I think Lompoc's won now 34 straight LPL games, and if you can't make it to Houck Stadium Friday night, that's where we'll be calling the game live at SantaMariaTimes.com. As the Braves host the Knights, we'll have a pregame show starting at 6:45 p.m. and kickoff is at 7 p.m. at Houck Stadium. So if you want to stay in the comforts of your own home and watch online, there's the link. We'll be live 6:45 p.m. Friday night. Moving over to the Pac-5 League, Elliot, you mentioned it briefly. You're going to be at Paso Robles Friday night, where they'll be playing at Flamson Middle School against Righetti. I was on hand for their 38-28 home loss to Arroyo Grande last week. It was more interesting than that score kind of indicates. It was 24-0 Arroyo Grande at halftime, but the Warriors did put up 28 second half points. Brandon Giddings was good. The rushing attack finally got some rhythm there in that second half. Elliot, do you think the Warriors can maybe stun the Bearcats Friday night, or do you think Paso Robles is going to stay perfect in the Pac-5 League?
Well, anything is possible. Righetti's been kind of up and down. They can't afford a slow start in this game. Paso was awful to begin the year. They went through an awful lot of turmoil, but they got a couple players back, and since the league has started, they're 2-0. Nobody's really put up numbers against them. So I'm thinking, there was a few years ago, 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago, Hart High School had one of these seasons like Paso's having, where they could not win a game, and then they got to their league season, went 4-0, and went on to win the CIF Southern Section Championship in their division. I'm looking at Paso doing the same kind of thing, where they're 3-4 overall, but 2 of those 3 wins are in the league, and that's what counts. They always talk about the preseason as, they count on your record, but they don't count towards you getting to the playoffs. They're 2-0. I can see them running the table, and I think Righetti's their next victim. I think it's going to be a similar game where Righetti's going to figure it out, but figure it out too late.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Lorenzo, you've seen Righetti a few times this year. Can they match up with Paso Robles and what they bring to the table?
They're capable, especially in the running game, but, credit to J.R. Reynolds at Paso Robles taking over after the turmoil that happened with Larry Grant. And here's another thing to keep in mind about Paso. They had McClymonds on the schedule, a defending state champion. They had Sierra Canyon on the schedule, defending state champion. Cajon High on the schedule, a powerhouse in the Inland Empire. Of course, I mean, it's hard to win those 3 games, but then you get to league play, and they manhandled Arroyo Grande, and then they're at 2-0. So credit really goes to that staff for being able to keep those guys together and, you know, just implement the whole don't give up attitude in Paso Robles. So I think that resiliency is going to make it even tougher for Righetti, but I just feel like that if their running game gets going with Robles and the shotgun wing tee, I mean, the advantage can swing towards Righetti's way. But I agree with you, Elliot. They have to start fast because I saw how they got buried into a hole against Arroyo Grande. Even with that comeback, it was already too late. They can't afford that in this game.
Yeah, definitely can't be down 24 points at halftime and expect to win a game, although they did make it close, losing just by 10 last week. Brandon Giddings has showed his moxie. He was banged up a lot against Arroyo Grande. He kept making plays. Jalen Davis is pretty much a matchup nightmare. And now we see Caleb Thomas is in the offense a little bit. They threw a couple passes his way Friday night. He's lining up more as a tight end, so maybe they can present a few matchup problems and make it close. Perhaps Paso Robles is already looking ahead to that Atascadero game, so maybe Righetti can, you know, slip in there and pull out a win on the road Friday night. Elliot, you'll be over there catching that one live. Moving over to the Northern League, Santa Maria now 2-0 in the Northern League after a 40-19 homecoming win over Morro Bay last week. That one was a little closer than I think most people would think. Morro Bay actually held a lead there for a while before the Saints rallied and went on to that 21-point win. And now they play a Calabasas Viewpoint team that is going to play here at Santa Maria in a non-league game. Santa Maria kind of had to fill that void left by Mission Prep moving to the 8-man. So it's kind of a weird matchup this late in the season having a non-league game. But the Saints have played well. Viewpoint's just 2-5. You know, they're going to play Napomo in the season closing game. Maybe they're focused on that one already, but I don't think they'll have too much trouble against Viewpoint. Lorenzo, you've talked about their struggles with roster numbers. They're 2-5. I think they had to forfeit the game against Paraclete. Early on this season, do you think the Saints are going to have any trouble with this Viewpoint
I don't
team?
see it. I mean, I think the Saints are peaking at the right time. I mean, just they're healthy, their offense is in sync, and Blake Truitt continues to be a matchup nightmare. He's one of the – we talk about guys who are hard to game plan for. I mean, we mentioned the guys like Toa Tawa, Shamar Savage. We have to include Truitt as well. I mean, he's very difficult to game plan against because of his ability to not only like chuck it deep, but just be slippery, not even when wet. So, I mean, Viewpoint, especially in terms of depth, they're going to have a hard time trying to keep guys who are like just preventing themselves not being exhausted from trying to stop him, or also that running game as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Blake Truitt, and we haven't done a lot of time talking about MVPs or all area MVPs or league MVPs, but I think there may not be a more valuable player in the area than Blake Truitt. He does pretty much everything on offense for them. Leading rusher, great passer. You know, he's all over the field. So I think, you know, Santa Maria would not be where they're at without him at quarterback. I know they haven't had the team success like Toa Tawa's Braves has had over there at Lompoc, but I think the value, just looking at straight value, I don't think you can find a more valuable player than Blake Truitt this year.
I can't think of a quarterback who has had that kind of impact at Santa Maria since Chewy Frosto. I'm sure he's a name you're familiar with, Elliot.
Yeah, I remember Chewy. The thing is, they've overcome the loss of Isaiah Garcia. It was long enough ago in the season that he went down that they've had to figure out how to play the game without him. Now, Truitt's shouldered a whole lot of that load, but the other running backs are now working into the mix, so he doesn't have to be such a one-man band, because at this point, if that's all you've got is one good player, it's tough to win games. But this Viewpoint team, they're having trouble suiting up players. The last roster that we got had 29 players. They're pretty even with they've run 200 offensive plays this year. That's not a lot, with 104 passes and 96 runs. Their quarterback, Nico Candido's throwing for 163 yards a game, but they're not scoring a lot of points. They've got a kid named Dakari Barney, who's running for about 75 yards a game, but they're not doing too well, and a lot of those numbers are coming late in the game where you can fatten your statistics in a loss because you're playing against the second teams. So I think if Santa Maria doesn't look ahead, towards making the playoffs and getting ahead of themselves. They focus on the game in front of them. They should be able to win it, and fairly big too. I think this could be the blowout of the weekend.
Okay. Dan Ellington was our all-area coach last year after the Saints went 5-5. Do you think he's done a better coaching job this year with the injuries and getting this team right, especially if they do end up beating Napomo and winning that Northern League championship?
I think so, and mostly because the injuries, not only to Garcia, they've had other guys go down that they've had to replace, he's kept the morale up, to kept the team together. I've gone to practices all year, and sometimes you go to, I was at Orchid Academy's practice yesterday, and they're just brimming with enthusiasm, and you see that with Dan Ellington's kids. And I've been to other practices where they're going through the motions, and it's tough to get up because they've already figured it's a lost season, so why bother? But he's got them believing in his program, and one of the things that we said when he took that over is if he'd stick around and give that program some continuity, that would be as valuable as game planning. And he's shown the kids that he's there, he's going to stay there, that he believes in them, and they believe in the fact that he knows what he's talking about. He's a coach with a lot of experience at Righetti High School, at Pioneer Valley High School. He was a successful head coach at Pioneer Valley. So there's a lot of enthusiasm, and that program is building. And I don't know that we would vote him again as Coach of the Year because of the numbers aren't all in yet. Doug May is doing a great job with his 8-man team over there at Orchid Academy. In my mind, he gets some consideration. Valley Christian is surprisingly good, another 8-man team. And of course, one of these guys that's hurt by his own success is Andrew Jones. Why doesn't he get Coach of the Year every year when they run through the league? They haven't lost an LPL game in, 34 games, you said? Mm-hmm. So. We kind of overlook him, but Ellington is right up there with the best of the coaches in the area, and he's doing it again.
I think what it is that in the case of Jones, he has a stacked roster, whereas with Ellington, he's dealing with a Santa Maria program that had been down for a number of years, and he's trying to build the enthusiasm back up, and he's done just that. And going back to Righetti, I applaud the job Ed Herman has done with turning things around there, because again, teams that go for 1-9 seasons, sometimes they press the reset button and they clean house. Well, credit to Righetti for sticking with Herman and being able to get things turned around. And I think Jim Chavala has done an exceptional job as well as St. Joseph, considering the fact that he came on board late, but he had a stacked roster. And, there was a big win against St. Bonaventure, the tough schedule, and, still being able to post 5 victories with the schedule that they played. I think Jim Chavala, considering it's his first season as head coach, he's done an exceptional job.
Yeah, I think Josh McClurg at Santa Ynez is another guy. If they finish out strong with, maybe beating St. Joseph and Pioneer Valley to close out its season, I think, he would definitely be in the running. And Santa Ynez is looking to bounce back from that 10-point defeat at Lompoc Friday night by hosting Pioneer Valley. Pioneer Valley, though, is coming off a big win as well over Cabrillo. You can't really say too much about a win over Cabrillo. Just about everybody is beat up on the Conchs this year. But Matthew Garcia was good in that game, throwing 3 TDs. But Santa Ynez, they have some momentum, even though they're coming off that loss. They were right there in that game until the last-second field goal. I think Travis Reeland had something like 25 tackles in that game, according to Santa Ynez's own statistics. So that was crazy. Do you think Pioneer Valley can challenge Santa Ynez at all, or are they going to, put that loss to Lompoc behind them? What do you think about that Santa Ynez PV matchup?
I think Santa Ynez, honestly, they're going to take that Lompoc game personal. They're going to be fueled by the fact that they were so close. They kept things in check. They were right there throughout the whole night until that fourth quarter when Tower broke that 25-yard run. But, I'm anticipating that Santa Ynez is going to take it out on Pioneer Valley. It was a nice win for PV. Garcia had a terrific performance, but this defense is something else, not just with Travis Breland, but A.J. Reynoso is just a stout. Well, he had 17 tackles in that contest. And then you have Dustin Gregg, who could play some free safety as well. He managed to pick off Xavier Nix in that game. Then you got Gabe Pilato anchoring the nose tackle position. So I just feel like Santa Ynez still has the playmaker edge.
All right, Elliot, what do you think about that matchup? PB was struggling in the LPL. They did beat up on Cabrillo, so maybe they do have some momentum. Maybe San Ynez is a little beat up from that Lompoc game. You think that's going to be a close one, or do you think San Ynez is going to get back on track?
I think back on track. I think that among our top teams in this area, you've got 3 of them in that Los Padres League, and Lompoc, San Ynez, and St. Joe are still the class of that league. You've got Paso coming on strong in the Pac-5, and I don't know that there's some good teams in the Northern League, but I don't think they compete with any of the top teams in the other leagues. So I think that San Ynez is going to have, if they can shake it off, they say, okay, we lost. Let's get back to winning. And if they do that, then Pioneer Valley's going to have a world of hurt on their hands. They got some talent, just not enough, because, I mean, they've got wide receivers at San Ynez that can catch, 70, 80-yard touchdown passes. They can strike quickly. They're not the only team that can, but they can strike quickly, so that they can run, they can pass, they got a good defense. I like John Ruiz over at Pioneer Valley, and he's working hard, and the kids are working hard with him, but I just can't see them. It might be closer than I'm thinking. It's not going to be close, but it could be closer than I'm thinking. But I still see it as a San Ynez win.
All right. And moving on to 8-man, this is their final week of the regular season, and the big game in the Mount Pinos League is Orchid Academy playing in Ojai, about 2 hours south of here, against Villanova Prep, an undefeated team. Elliot, how do you feel about that matchup? Orchid Academy does have the 1 loss, but they can win their first football league championship with the win at Villanova Prep. What do you think the Spartans' chances are?
I think they're good. I think they're really good. The kids are up for this game. They see they could win their first ever league championship. It's sort of the Condor League. It's the Mount Pinos League now, but Villanova, it's Laguna Blanca. Dropped back from 8-man Division I to 8-man Division II and became a freelance team. So that left them short 1 team. They changed the name of the league. In all other sports, they're still the Condor League. Yeah, they're 7-1. But who'd they lose to? The top-ranked team in Division I of 8-man is Faith Baptist. That's who they lost to. And it was a good game. Orchid Academy is number 2. Villanova Prep is number 3. Orchid Academy will now be playing their 5th game against the top 10 teams in that division. Wow. They easily have had the toughest schedule in that division, and they're 7-1. They beat defending Division I champ Mojave. They beat Kate for the first time ever. They beat the number 10 team, Flint Ridge Prep. They are really battle tested. They're up for this game, and they're not taking a thing for granted. They're practicing everything. They're working on kickoffs with onside kicks and pooch kicks and ground ball kicks and covering the ball, and that mean their defense is working on. They've got tape or disc video of Villanova Prep, and they see their tendencies. So they've got a scout team that is doing all of Villanova Prep's offense, and they're working really hard for this one. So yeah, Villanova Prep is 8-0, but they haven't played the kind of schedule. Now it is in Ojai on an 80-yard grass field, their home field. It's a very nice little stadium. Both teams are 2-0 in the league. They beat the same 2 teams, and the scores are similar. Villanova Prep beat Kate by about 5, and they both beat who was it? Thatcher by about 20. So the scores have been similar against common opponents, but Orchid Academy's played a tougher schedule, and they've moved the game from a 2 o'clock start, which is what it was going to be, to a 7 o'clock start, so that the temperatures, they won't be playing in 100-degree type temperatures, because even though the temperature in general is supposed to cool off, Ojai's up there in the mountains, like inland, where it gets to be really hot. So that'll work to Orchid Academy's benefit, but I just see that this is going to be another barn burner, and it could be. I don't think it'll be 72-68 the way it was at the Kate game, but it could be something like 48-42 going Orchid's way. It's going to be it's going to be tough for those defenses on both sides of the ball.
You talk about the hot weather. Well, we've had some hot weather here, so I mean, I guess Orchid Academy is already preparing for those kind of elements with that. But this is the biggest game, I think, in program history for the Spartans. I mean, truthfully, I think it's even bigger than the Mojave game that we saw. I mean, yeah, defending champion who came over to this area, but I mean, just Orchid Academy's been on a mission all year long. We talk about Lompoc being on a mission, St. Inez. Well, we also can't overlook the fact that the Spartans have been on the mission all season long with the talent that came back and chasing their first ever league title. So,
well, they beat Mojave, so they beat the Division I champions. They beat Kate, their biggest rival in that league. They're the closest team to them. They don't play Valley Christian because they're a Division II team, and they've got just way too many players. Not enough for an 11-man squad, but way more than Valley Christian and Shandon and Maricopa and those Coast Valley League teams. So that's why they're in the Mount Pinos, formerly Condor League. So they play against the Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, Ojai schools. So Kate's their closest rival. Laguna Blanca's in Santa Barbara. They never figured them as their biggest rival, and they got past that, but they didn't then suffer a letdown celebrating that historic Kate victory. So they beat the defending CIF champs. They beat their biggest rival, and now they're in their biggest game, and I think they're really up for it. They want to bring this one home. They want a home game in the first week of the playoffs, and they want to see if they can get a rematch with Faith Baptist. And they can't look down the road too far, but they'll take it one game at a time. But they want that rematch with Faith Baptist and show them that what was it, a 42-28 loss was a fluke, and that they can beat them this time around.
All right, that's all we got for this week. Remember, Friday night we'll be at Houck Stadium as the Braves host the Knights. Tune in, 6:45 pregame show. Kickoff is at 7 p.m. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to 805 Sports Talk.